Hello fellow introverts and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to cover a topic. A boy, a young boy, is either purveyor of innocence and childhood, or is he a demon spawn stealing children?
All children, except one, grow up.
When J.M. Barrie wrote that line about Peter Pan in 1911, it was generally taken as the expression of a beautiful and melancholy fantasy. Children are so lovely and so innocent that it seems to be a shame that they have to stop being children eventually. Peter Pan, the boy who wouldn't grow up, is the expression of the dream that they may not have to, and as such he is both beautiful and tragic. But in our own era, the idea of a child who never grows up has decidedly sinister bent to it. Since Peter Pan's EU copyright expired in 2008, reimaginings and remixes of the story have flourished, including the most recent Christina Henry's Lost Boys, the true story of Captain Hook, and most of those reimaginings, Lost Boys included, have tended to transform the eternally innocent Peter into a villain. It's true that we live in an era that's particularly prone to giving dark and gritty reboots to beloved children's properties, but Peter Pan seems to lend itself to particularly well to this kind of transformation. It's remarkably easy to recast Barrie's innocent and heartless Peter as a villain, just as easy to reimagine Captain Hook, the former Eton student who's obsessed with good form, as a hero. You don't need to change the mythology of Neverland all that much. You just need to turn the setting of Neverland from a game with game logic into literal truth. Then all the darkness and creepiness that lurks beneath the surface of Barrie's fantasy island, and all the sinister tragedy that wound through Barrie's life, suddenly becomes legible. Because since the character's inception, Peter Pan has been both fantasy and nightmare, for both Barrie himself and for the family of little boys who inspired him throughout their short, bleak lives. J.M. Barrie began the story of Peter Pan in his 1902 novel, The Little White Bird. It's a semi-autobiographical tale of a man becoming enamored with a little boy who he wants to steal away from his mother in order to befriend the child. He makes up the story of Peter Pan, the fairy bird baby who lived in London's Kensington Gardens. Peter Pan is a week-old baby when he leaves home, and he never ages past that marker. He believes that his mother will always leave the window open for him, so he plays gleefully with the fairies and the birds without fear of losing her affection. But when he finally makes up his mind to go back to her, he finds it's too late. Windows are barred, and his mother is cuddling another baby. Her love was conditional after all, and now that she's replaced him, it's a portrait of Peter Pan that's much more tragic than the iconic portrait to come. The whole thing is based on Barrie's own relationship with George Davies, a 5-year-old boy he met in Kensington Gardens when he was 35. Barrie's dog, the basis for Nana, ran right up to him, and for whom he nursed deep affection. Barrie was soon to develop a similarly deep and jealous friendship with George's 4 little brothers, John, Michael, Nicholas, and Peter, the last of whom would ultimately share the name with Peter Pan. Critics and biographers have been arguing for decades about whether or not this was anything sexual about Barrie's affection for the boys, and the question has never been settled to anybody's satisfaction. Most of Barrie's contemporaries describe him as asexual, although he was married twice, but never fathered any children of his own. I don't believe that Uncle Jim would experience what one might call a stirring in the undergrowth for anyone, man, woman, adult, or child. Nicholas, the youngest of the Davies children, remarked, as an adult, he was an innocent. Sexual or not, the affection was certainly proprietary. The Davies children's mother in 1910, their father had died in 1907, Barrie, then 50 years old, altered her will to suggest that she meant for him to take guardianship of her sons, rather than their nanny. And so, fulfilled by the dream of the narrator of The Little White Bird, the Davies children would live with Barrie for years. But before he became their guardian, Barrie was merely a faithful friend of the Davies boys, and he and his wife vacationed with the Davies family, and Barrie played with the children around the lake, creating endless tales of pirates and Indians and fairies. Those stories would become the book of photographs, obstinately authored by Peter Davies and published by Barrie just for the family, and then the beginnings of the Peter Pan story in The Little White Bird. In 1904, the story became a play, Peter Pan, or The Boy Who Would Never Grow Up. And in 1911, Barrie turned the play into a book, originally titled Peter and Wendy, but soon became known as Peter Pan. That's a book we usually think about when we talk about the original book of Peter Pan, although it's several steps removed from the original. The Peter Pan of both the book and the play retains a tragic backstory of the Peter Pan of the Little White Bird, but he is no longer confined to Kensington Gardens. Now, he has all of Neverland to play in, and pirates to fight, and the Lost Boys to play with, and Wendy Darling, and all of her descendants to transform into mothers to replace his original, inferior mother. He is no longer a tragic week-old baby left off to fend for himself, but a gleeful, delighted, school-age sprite, forever crowing, "Oh, the cleverness of me." He is, in short, no longer a sentimental Victorian tragedy, but an ageless fantasy. And the only true tragedy is when Wendy will inevitably grow up and thus cannot play with him and be his mother forever. Peter kills pirates and Lost Boys alike without remorse. But these are play deaths and carry no emotional weight with them. You get the sense that his victims will get back up smiling and be ready to play again as soon as Peter turns his back. The emotional weight, when all comes to an end, when Peter meets the adult Wendy, who is helpless and guilty, a big woman with something inside her, crying, "Woman, woman, let go of me," because she feels so strongly that she would remain a child for Peter's sake, and for the sake of the child she used to be. By growing up, she abandoned Peter, just as his first mother did, and this causes Peter to cry, but not for long, because there's a replacement waiting for him, Wendy's daughter Jane, and then Jane's daughter after that. There are always more children to play with, and always more mothers. Peter Pan became an icon, but the Davies children lived short and tragic lives. George died at the age of 21 as a soldier during World War I in 1915. Michael was just shy of his 21st birthday when he drowned in 1921, and it is widely believed to have been a suicide. John died of lung disease in 1959 at the age of 65. Peter, who called Peter Pan that terrible masterpiece, died of suicide in 1960 at the age of 63. And Nicholas, the only one who called Barrie an innocent, survived until he died of natural causes in 1980 at the age of 77. Barrie himself died of pneumonia at the age of 77 in 1937. But he had been devastated by George and Michael's death years earlier, and he had come to think of Peter Pan less as a celebration of the childhood innocence of his young friends and more of a referendum for himself. It is as if long after writing Peter Pan, its true meaning has come to me. Desperate attempts to grow up, but can't. Perhaps because the circumstances surrounding Peter Pan were so very sad and dark, once you decide you're interested in turning Peter Pan into a villain, it's quite easy to do so. In both book and play, Peter murders pirates easily, without care. In the book, we learned that Peter kills the Lost Boys too, either to thin the herd or because they grow up, which is against the rules. He also periodically alters the Lost Boys' bodies so they can fit through the tree holes that lead into their underground lair. And because he cannot tell the difference between pretend and real life, he sometimes gives them pretend meals and refuses to believe that they are still hungry. The Lost Boys and the Darlings face profound danger throughout the book and play, but Peter tends to find the danger entertaining rather than frightening. He always saves them, but less because he wants to help them and more because it's going to give him another opportunity to celebrate his own cleverness. If Neverland is an arena of games, which is how it began, with Barrie and the Davies children inventing wildly around the lake in the countryside, this is fun and silly adventuring, and the deaths and mutilations and starvations don't feel real. But if you begin to take Neverland literally, and you treat the characters who aren't Peter and the Darlings as real people and not as props to have an adventure around, becomes extremely disturbing. So in Christina Henry's Lost Boy, the latest revisitation of Peter Pan's story, bloodthirsty Peter Pan isn't so much as the spirit of eternal youth, but rather a sinister cult leader, luring young boys away from their families, periodically starving them, and then drives them to murder each other in a game he always calls battle. The boys adore and hate and fear Peter in equal measure, but because they are now alone on the island of Neverland and have no way to returning home, they have to follow him. He is their only protector. None of that is particularly inconsistent with the characterization of Barrie's Peter, but Barrie would never care to look at Peter from the perspective of the Lost Boy, because he didn't create the Lost Boys to be characters with their own perspectives. He created them to be objects in a game, and that's how both the book and the play treat them. It's also how Peter treats them, because Peter is a child. The ability to think of other people as people is not just as objects in a game of your life, is a characteristic of adulthood. For Peter, the eternal child, thinking that other people as people is utterly impossible, and both book and play make it abundantly clear Peter, who represents youth, is innocent and heartless. No one truly matters to him beyond himself. It seems when Barrie first conceived of Peter Pan, he found the fantasy of living heartlessly as Peter to be immensely appealing, which is why he was able to turn it into a sentimental fairy tale. Later, he found it appalling. He wanted to grow up, to develop true empathy, but felt he could not. Both sides of the ideal of the selfish child, the fantasy, and the nightmare live in Peter Pan. And that's what makes it exceptionally easy to turn Peter Pan from a hero to a villain, and to see his author alternatively as a beloved genius and a twisted man who ruins child's lives. Now let's talk about the opposite side of that coin, shall we? There is a running theory that it deserves its own attention. This theory states that Captain Hook was the original Lost Boy, and it states that Captain Hook was once a member of the Lost Boys before he became a pirate and took on a villainous persona. The theory suggests that Captain Hook, as a young boy, joined Peter Pan and the Lost Boys in their adventures in Neverland. However, over time, Hook grew tired of the eternal childhood and the lack of structure in Neverland. He yearned for order, control, and a sense of authority, which he couldn't find among the Lost Boys. As a result, Hook left the Lost Boys, eventually became a pirate, taking on the leadership role as the captain of his crew. This theory posits that his bitterness and resentment towards Peter Pan and the Lost Boys stem from his own personal experience and feelings of betrayal, as he believes they abandoned him or failed to meet his expectations. This interpretation adds depth to the character of Captain Hook, highlighting that his complex relationship with Peter Pan and his own journey from a lost boy to a feared pirate captain. It also raises questions about the nature of growing up, responsibilities, and choices individuals make in their lives. Another interesting theory suggests that Captain Hook symbolizes the passage of time and the fear of aging. His obsession with clocks and his constant pursuit of Peter Pan, who embodies eternal youth, could be seen as a metaphor for the relentless march of time and the fear of mortality. Another theory proposes that Captain Hook represents a strict and authoritative father figure. This interpretation stems from the character's desire to control and discipline the Lost Boys, who represent unruly and disobedient children. Hook's rivalry with Peter Pan can be seen as a reflection of a power struggle between a father figure and a rebellious child. Some other theories view Captain Hook as a tragic character rather than a pure villain. It is suggested that the victim of circumstance, driven to villainy by his past experience. This theory explores Hook's backstory, speculating on events that might have shaped him into a vengeful pirate captain we encounter in the story. And then finally, in the original story, Captain Hook is plagued by the fear of the crocodile that swallowed his hand. This fear is being hunted and pursued adds a layer of vulnerability to Hook's character. Some theories suggest that the crocodile symbolizes Hook's guilt or his impending doom, representing the consequences of his actions catching up with him. Now, we can't talk about Captain Hook without talking about the crocodile that seems to follow him everywhere. Again, this is theoretical. So, one prevalent theory is that the crocodile symbolizes time and mortality. The crocodile's ticking clock and its relentless pursuit of Captain Hook, who fears the creature due to having lost his hand to it, represents the passage of time and the inevitability of death. The crocodile's presence serves as a constant reminder to the finite nature of life. Another theory suggests that the crocodile foreshadows Captain Hook's fate, as the crocodile swallowed Hook's hand and is constantly seeking to devour him. It serves as the harbinger of the pirate captain's eternal demise. Crocodile represents the consequences of Captain Hook's actions catching up with him. Some other theories propose that the crocodile embodies a dual nature. On one hand, it represents danger and menace as it pursues Hook and others in Neverland. On the other hand, the crocodile also brings an element of comic relief to the story with the ticking clock and comical interactions. This duality adds complexity to the crocodile's character. In certain interpretations, the crocodile is depicted as being driven by its own desire for revenge against Captain Hook. The theory suggests that the crocodile's relentless pursuit of Hook is motivated by its hunger for retribution due to the loss of its meal. Theory adds a layer of poetic justice and karma to the crocodile's story. Now, there are a few other minor ideals for Peter Pan. One, that he's a demon. Some argue that Peter Pan acts as a tempter, luring children away from their homes and families to Neverland. This can be seen as parallel in how demons are often portrayed as manipulative beings who entice individuals into making bad choices. In some interpretations, it is suggested that Peter Pan's desire for eternal youth and the ability to fly come at a cost of capturing the souls of children who join him in Neverland. This idea also draws parallels with demonic entities that feed off or manipulate human souls. Thirdly, Peter Pan's shadow, which becomes attached to him in the original story, is often seen as a representation of his darker, demonic side. The shadow is portrayed as having a life and conscience of its own, suggesting the duality within Peter Pan. Finally, the last of the similarities with something else that I will bore you with on this day is the resemblance of Peter Pan to Pan, the god from Greek mythology, often associated with nature, wilderness, and shepherds. One of the connections made, obviously, is the name Peter Pan and Pan. It is speculated that J.M. Barrie may have drawn inspiration from the Greek god's name when naming his character. Pan is also known for his association with nature and the wilderness. While Peter Pan is often depicted as living in the magical and untamed world of Neverland, this parallel has led to some to theorize that Peter Pan embodies Pan's characteristics as a nature deity. Pan is often depicted as having the lower body of a goat, horns and hooves. In some illustrations and adaptations of Peter Pan, he is portrayed with goat-like features, such as pointy ears and a mischievous grin. This physical resemblance has been used to support the theory of a connection between the two. Finally, Pan is known for his mischievous behavior and playful personality. Peter Pan shares similar traits. Both characters exhibit a childlike nature, a refusal to grow up, and a penchant for adventure and pranks. Now, with that all being said, what do you guys think? It is really easy to dismiss things like children leaving their homes and, feeding a grown man's hand to a crocodile as mere jokes and not really big deals when you're a child, but when you grow up, they seem to carry a different weight. And with that, I will go ahead and close this chapter of self-reflection, and I will talk to you nerds later.